Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stan Lowe. I'm Zscaler's Global Chief Information Security Officer, and we're going to be talking today about transforming agility and security in a cloud world, 6 critical steps for you can read the rest of the slide. So one of the things that, you'll notice Slim Pickens on the back of there. If any of you have ever seen Dr. Strangelove, that's him sort of riding a nuclear bomb into the target area. And that's sometimes that's what it sort of makes me think of when I think of being a CISO and things change, because we're creatures of habit and we like our things to remain constant. And sometimes when change happens, it feels a little bit like Slim Pickens there. So I thought that was kind of cute. To move forward here a little bit, yeah, we'll get that one. What I'll do here is, since I'm talking now, I'm going to go ahead and kill my video, so that makes sure that we have a good amount of actually kill the video, not the audio. The buttons are small and I'm blind. So again, you can't get a speaker without them sitting there and talking a little bit about themselves. There's a little bit about me, a little bit about my career history. As you can see, I'm sort of like the Forrest Gump of the cybersecurity world. I've been in and out of the private sector and government. I did a stint at DARPA. I got to meet Grace Hopper, if you don't know who she is, Google. Awesome thing. I've been a Zscaler and a Global Chief Information Security Officer for almost 2 years now. So to go ahead and kick this off, one of the things that for us as cybersecurity professionals, COVID and the pandemic is driving an unprecedented lots of changes. So social distancing, business continuity, and remote employees have all we've seen impacts on all of that, and it's not something that we really plan for, because when we do pandemic planning, we plan for small incidents that are geographically centered, that affect a certain percentage of our employees. This turned into be something, unless you're a medical, you're in the medical group or you're in the government, typically you don't plan or design for pandemic issues. But we essentially, we're experiencing all of these interesting things that we haven't necessarily planned for, and some of the things that we need to start thinking about, transforming how we think about both our businesses, our IT, our security infrastructure, as well as how we are going to or have been handling all of our remote employees, being able to provide them access to applications and data no matter where they are, using our devices, their devices, or whatever. So we're basically set, and we're dependent upon, a process and an architecture that we designed not to support this, but we're now in a position to where we have to figure out what we've sort of designed ourselves into a corner to be able to support, our legacy architectures and our legacy data infrastructures to support a cloud-based environment or disparate workforce that had been, distributed across different parts of our, organizations back in home, or, being sent to work from home. We call it work from home, but it's not really work from home. It's trapped at home, because a lot of our organizations aren't necessarily have a lot of folks that have been working remotely. So it's more, trying to make do as we can. It turns out that the things that we put in place to be able to support a business continuity plan weren't necessarily capable of supporting all of our workers going home and accessing those resources all at once, which is kind of, was not something that we had ever thought we would have to happen, unless you're in certain verticals such as healthcare or government or something like that. Turns out the stuff that we've designed is not meeting our demand. So there's a couple of things that we need to start thinking about what we are doing. Our businesses, we've seen a demand in SAS Traffic for Office 365, Workday, different types of SaaS applications, from Oracle Financials to SAP to S4HANA, SAP S4HANA, things like that. Our businesses have had to adjust their internal processes and access to tools and technology to be able to support the economic situation that we are in. And that then drove, from a corporation's perspective, a large increase to those SaaS applications to be able to support our businesses, to make sure that we can at least maintain some type of normality with regards to driving revenue. So as you can see from the chart here, in the first few, up until last week, we have seen a huge uptick in the amount of traffic both across Zscaler's web. We crossed 1 trillion transactions a day not too terribly long ago, and it's primarily because of this. We've seen a huge amount in traffic both in North America, Europe, and Asia. So, the issue is based upon what we see here that we've designed for traditionally. What we need to start thinking is like, hey, what do we need to do to be able to support our workforce, not only now, but going forward? So we talked about 6 things that you need to do. These are things that are based upon, not having an architecture that supports a remote workforce. Things like, and these are painful for our businesses because this is not how we ever envisioned our organizations operating like. So taking into account and sort of basically triaging the things for the applications and the data that we need to be able to provide access for, looking at things like prioritizing work. What things are the most important for our businesses? What things that are actually contribute to the bottom line? What resources are we going to need to be able to support those? And what stuff that we can kick down the road or even cut that don't contribute to the things that we need to do to actually protect and drive revenue, which really, gets you an opportunity. I'm a huge fan of never letting a good crisis go to waste, is being able to examine the things that you're doing, to cut out the stuff that you did just because you always did them. There's an old story about, a bunch of a family that got together, and they would get together every year for the holiday, and they would make a ham, and the ends of the ham were cut off, and the mother finally said, hey, it's you kids' turn to go and make holiday dinner. And they're all sitting around in the kitchen, and they're arguing about why, and postulating why the ends of the ham were cut off. And everybody's like, oh, it makes it taste better, it keeps, whatever. So finally they go out in there. I said, mother, I said, no, I cut it off because it made I had to cut the ends off the ham so it fit in the pan I had. So, use this opportunity as, I know it's kind of an odd little thing to say, but, it's a good illustrative story that illustrates the point, is use this as an opportunity to look for things that you just do because you do them, to see whether or not you do them or not. You actually, if they're making an impact, or they're actually driving mission, what you need to do. Again, you may have to prioritize access. How can you align your access with work priorities? You're going to have to triage this. What work requires always-on connectivity? What doesn't? You may have to provide tiered connectivity based. What that means is tiered connectivity is you have a group of essential employees that have their work is critical to the organization. You may have folks that are not tier 1 employees. They may be tier 2 employees, which is what they do, or supportive of what the tier 1 employees, and you may have to provide access based upon that. Devices, who gets a laptop, you got to figure out who gets the limited amount of devices that you have, because a lot of folks have spend a lot of more money on desktops because those are significantly more inexpensive. You may have a lot of legacy pieces of equipment that you may have to start sending out, or you would have had to start sending out to individuals so they can actually access this. So again, that goes into, who gets the device, or who gets the mobile device, or even do you actually allow access using personal devices, bring your own stuff to work. Collaboration apps, again, things like Zoom, which is what you're using today. You're going to need more licenses. Are you going to need, more sorry about that. That was my phone. I didn't turn it off. Ration collaboration apps, so you're going to need more licenses. You're going to have to work for the finance guys to reallocate travel spending to be able to buy licenses. There's a lot of questions that you would have had to ask. The other part of this is staggering work hours. if it really comes down to it, and you're pressed for resources, access, bandwidth, and capacity, yeah, you may have to say, okay, for you guys, you may have to go to a 24-hour access schedule, which means your tier 1 employees get 8 to 4, depending upon what your business's needs are with regards to supporting the drive to protecting revenue and growth. The other part of that is you may actually have to start looking at deploying local internet breakouts, the cloud, and specifically start looking at service access edge computing, because you're not going to be, or you haven't been able to, there's a long lead time on buying equipment. If you want to buy, you add additional capacity to your VPN concentrator or whatever, it's going to take 90 or so days to get that stuff. So we're, into this, you're heavily into this. You may want to have to start looking at things like, internet things, for different types of stuff you're going to need to do, like internet breakout and stuff like that. Anyway, but the cool thing is moving to those type of technologies allows you to alleviate and reduce your DAC service and alleviate your VPN network concentrations or bottlenecks. But those things are we're all, if you haven't done them by now, the chances are that it's going to be, something that you're going to have to start planning for what comes next. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about now is we're in the midst of this. So if you haven't gotten to this point and you haven't figured this out at this point, it's probably, you're a little late in the game. So if that's the case, then you need to start thinking about what comes next. And your organizations and your C-levels, we're already mandating evolving to using cloud applications, SaaS services, to be able to drive top line revenue and growth and transform your enterprise. Basically using that digital transformation word that we all love so much from an implementation perspective. But setting, the C-suite has already come up with the idea, the concept of operations that, hey, the cloud and cloud-based applications and cloud-based architectures are the way that organizations need to go, because it provides a great deal of agility and expandability to be able to expand and contract based upon the business flows and the different elements that the organization is using to actually drive that top-line growth. So the thing is what do we need to start thinking about planning, architecting for the next time? Because, there is going to be a next time. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Either a resurgence of what we're experiencing now, or there's going to be something that comes down the pike that is going to be equal to this or worse than this, God forbid. Now, what we need to do is to start thinking about this now, is to start architecting for what our businesses, what we need to put in place so our businesses can operate effectively for the next time that this happens. And that's something that, it's hard to do in the heat of the moment. You're doing all of these things to make sure your businesses can continue to exist and operate and do the things that they need to do. But you need to set a part of your mind over to start casting that weather eye down the road. Okay, this is what we're experiencing now. What are the lessons that we learned with regards to our business? And what are the things that we need to do with regards to planning, both budgeting and architecting, to be able to support a 100% distributed workforce? Because most organizations are looking around and they're going, we don't really need to maintain the physical plant infrastructure and the office space that we do today. A lot of organizations used to poo-poo remote work because they believe that workers that were working remotely weren't nearly as productive as seeing their bright shiny faces at their desk. Turns out not to be the case. A lot of organizations have realized that their employees not only are as productive as they were by coming into the office, but even more so because there's no commute time, there's no there's no lots of breaks talking to their buddies and stuff like that. There's a lot of added time that can be put towards productivity. So it's not, their organizations are starting to measure not necessarily your worth to the organization by how often you're at your desk, but more effectively, what is your output while you're working? So we're seeing them see that as a boon, as remote work is actually something that they're actually looking at as something that drives efficiency and drives efficacy. So you're seeing organizations like Twitter has come up and said, hey, listen, you don't ever have to come back to work again if you don't want to, which is, is interesting. And a lot of other organizations that we would have thought would never have gone that way are actually starting to move that way. There's large, investment banks in certain parts of the company that are looking around, or not the company, but in parts of the country that are looking around and they're saying, hey, do I need this space in, we'll just pick a city, an expensive city, Toronto, and I'm paying, close to $1 million a month for rent for this place. Do I actually need to do that in order to be, can I neck this down and have everybody work from home? So as we go through this, make sure that, I forgot to tell you questions. Pop your questions into the thing. I'm going to put some time at the end to go through those and answer those. So if you've got questions while we're talking or while I'm running my mouth, feel free to pop them in there and we'll get to them at the end. That way, because I'm not smart enough to answer questions and do this all at the same time. So hopefully that works for y'all. But again, the businesses are looking around and they're like, holy cow, this is we can work like this, which is, for us, from a security perspective and from an IT perspective, we have to start thinking, okay, now that our businesses are going to do this, we're going to be doing this full time. What do we need to start thinking about from an architectural perspective, from a risk perspective, and from a protective inspection perspective to make sure that we can protect our company's assets? So we have to first off recognize that where our employees are working and how our workers have changed. It's not ever going to go back to the same. And there will be instances where organizations, depending upon your vertical, if you're a manufacturer, you're probably going to go back to some form of work as it was before on the manufacturing floor and stuff like that. But I think we've seen that how we work and how our companies interact with us has changed. And again, that may stay. I think we send pendulums that swing back and forth between different methodologies or sociological ideas of how the workplace is supposed to work. But I think the concept of working from anywhere has been proven to be effective, that we're going to see a lot of organizations move to that model. And again, the concept of open workspace, I think, has gone away. It's going to go back to office space and the cubes. Which will be pretty cool. Not cool, but it depends. I like that, but and again, it gives you a little bit of concept of privacy. You may have swing workspaces or whatever, but the whole concept of our employees are working from anywhere, accessing applications either from lots of disparate locations, and those applications and those data, and that data is located in a lot of different places, both in a legacy data center and as well as in the cloud. Because we like to talk about cloud like it's, hey, well, let's all move to the cloud. That we know from experience that we're going to be living in a hybrid world where a lot of your applications and your data will be SaaS, but again, a lot of your legacy applications and a lot of your legacy data will be in your traditional data centers. So you're going to have to figure out a concept of operations that allows you to be able to provide access, remote access to both of those. So COVID has basically driven, accelerated the transformation from, our old world legacy data centers of being, it's the center of the world is our data center. We hub and spoke to everything from our different, remote offices, and we hauled it back to the internet and let the centralized data center, our security was built around a castle and moat, hard, crunchy exterior, soft, chewy center, that sort of thing. A lot of different, security devices built into our stack. Again, you've never met a security guy that didn't like a tool. We had a tendency to buy tools to solve problems without looking at the architecture as a whole. So we end up with a huge, complex security stack that costs a lot of money, which then impacted users and usability and user experience. Versus what we've been forced to go to, or what COVID has accelerated, and we saw that this was happening a few years ago. We are where we are now in the last 90 days from my perspective, where I thought we would be in about 2 years, 18 to 24 months. So we've had a lot of transformation and a lot of acceleration to the cloud that has happened in the last 90 to 120 days that I thought would take us 24 months to get there. So this has brought about a lot of interesting paradigms that we now have to take into consideration with regards to providing access to those applications and data, both in the legacy data center as well as in the SaaS application world. So this forces us to think about how we do cybersecurity. The way that we've done it in the past is not going to be is not going to be supported by the businesses. Our businesses are expecting us to be enablers because if we say no all the time, what they're going to do is they're just going to go around us, which creates risk for the organization. Security and IT now have to become business value enablers, which means you have to figure out how your little cog fits into the giant wheel of your organization's ability to drive and protect revenue. What is your role in allowing that to happen within the risk parameters of your organization? How risky are you willing to accept that? And again, if you have to be the individual that the organization that allows your businesses to use the tools and technology that they need to implement to be able to help you make sure your business continues to exist. Cybersecurity often gets and rightly so, tarred with you guys, the doctor knows, you say no to everything. So, being accused of putting the no in innovation. We have to think about how we do this and approach the problem differently. Because if we don't, our businesses are going to find some other way to do that, which will create risk, and nobody wants that. So, one of the things that Gartner's come out with over the last not too terribly long is they've come up with this thing called SASE, and it was started out as Zero Trust, or actually it was Beyond Corp, which is Google actually started talking about this. One of the things that I started looking at when I was still in the government, I ran a large governmental security organization, or organization inside a large federal department, 640,000 employees. We had, I had a $1.4 billion US budget, which is a lot, 5,000 employees. And I kept thinking that, all the doctors and they wanted to use all these really cool tools and technologies, but, the existing architecture that we had built didn't support that. And, the concept of like, hey, let's just increase our security boundary to encompass all these cloud tools and technologies got to be so cost prohibitive that we just couldn't do it. So started kicking around and came up with the concept of operations, which ended up, that I stole quite a bit from Beyond Corp, which started talking to the Google guys about, how to do certain types of things. And it sort of morphed into really, taking a look at the basic concept of SASE, which is something that Gartner came up with. Instead of, using the marketing buzzword of Zero Trust, which is essentially built around 4 principles of operation, which is, providing, ubiquitous policy access and pushing security to the furthest edge to where the access is, and not trying to secure the network, but trying to secure the identity in the individual based around those 4 principles of operation, which is 1, your identity, what we know about you. 2, the device you're trying to access with. Is it mine? Is it yours? Managed, unmanaged, whatever. 3, the location that you're trying to access from, on a legacy network, off a legacy network. And 3 or 4 rather is the criticality or the sensitivity of the application of data that you're trying to access. Then be able to provide a policy decision, both from an access and a security based upon those 4 principles. And that's sort of what Zero Trust is. So Gartner took all of that and they came up with a operation model that they call SASE, which, I've worked in the government a long time. They should have called me. I would have come up with a much better acronym than that. But, hey, it is what it is. So SASE is Secure Access Service Edge, which means essentially pushing everything out to the endpoints. Using direct access to access applications and data that support that, Office 365, Workday, ServiceNow, those types of things, AWS, those types of things, reducing the complexity of your security stack and your network. Because the more you push stuff out to the cloud, the more your businesses have access to those applications. Making your security stack and your access as least complex as possible is something that Gartner absolutely positively recommends. So as you're going out and you're designing a platform instead of an architecture, one of the things that you need to do is know that the enterprise perimeter has disappeared. The internet is your new network. So you have to start thinking about this as you're designing that and you're building for these capabilities. Remember, there are 6 core capabilities that you need to start thinking about as you design this next generation set of technologies or business enablement technologies. One is seamless and direct access to both external and internal applications. That has got to be, and that doesn't necessarily mean putting somebody on your network. That means, reducing your security stack and reducing your exposure to the extent that you really are getting something out of doing this by, either cost savings or whatever from reducing your external exposure. Context-aware application access that basically correlates the user, the device, the application to allow access to those applications based upon those 4 principles of operation. Flexible deployment across all users. You have to be able to expand and contract or change your deployment methodologies based upon the situation that you're in. That means being able to expand greatly for when in the event that we have another, or when we have another pandemic or event like this where everybody has to work from home, and then not so much, and then neck that down when they have to come back on the premise and stuff like that, and do it seamlessly and do it instantly. The thing that we don't talk about a lot is user experience. And one of the things that, our users accuse the security guys of constantly is, hey, listen, things are being done unto us rather than for us. So again, one of the things that we have to make sure that we absolutely realize is that what we're doing is becoming a business enabler, so that security then becomes business value that our organizations that can then tout, that will help drive revenue. And one of the best ways to do that is making sure that your users have a experience that allows them to use the tools and applications in the manner in which they were designed for, and do it in such a way that there's not a complaint or an issue around using those tools, because if there is, they'll do what they've always done, which is, they'll find some other way to access those tools and applications outside of your protection mechanism. So they'll proceed until apprehended. So we have to take into account user experience when we're deploying anything new. Comprehensive visibility inside this. That means, because you're now lost the, hey, listen, it's the network guys, and you have the ability to use troubleshooting tools that were self-contained in your own little environment. Being able to tell where the problem lies while you're troubleshooting connectivity issues or security issues, whether it's the last mile, whether it's the device, whether it's software on the device, whether it's the last mile, whether it's within the access methodology of the CASB organization. We think Zscaler is a good one, or within between the cloud and the access point, or the application of that you're trying to access, or whether it's there. You need a full 100% visibility from A to B to be able to troubleshoot that, to make sure your businesses can continue to operation the way they need to be. The other part of this is security and compliance tools to utilize the architecture that you're building to be able to provide the same level, if not more, protection for your applications and your data and your users, no matter where they are. So take these 6 core design capabilities and start using these to design what your network and your architecture is going to look like going forward, to be able to support your business's move or transformation to the cloud. So again, Gartner recommends that you move from a network-based security model to a platform policy-based security model. That's what we think is absolutely positively what we're going to see going forward. We've seen the evidence and the usability and the use case borne out by what we're seeing now, which means, direct access, making sure that you are securing access to that application and the data and not worrying so much about the network. One of the cool things that Zscaler is I get to talk a lot about, hey, this is what you should be, and this is the nirvana of where you need to be, that bright shining city on the hill. I'm fortunate enough to where I'm completely in a cloud-enabled organization. I have no legacy network. I have no internal network. We use the internet as a transport mechanism. I secure access to applications and data from at the access point. So we use all of our own tools and then some. There are things that we don't do. We don't do identity. We don't do EDR. We don't do endpoint management and stuff like that. So you're going to need other tools. But the idea is using a cloud security platform to be able to access your SaaS applications as well as your legacy applications inside your data center. So the users are secured, and the network that they're using for that access is irrelevant to you. That gives you a huge, powerful tool for your businesses to be able to do those things that are most important to them, which is protecting and driving revenue. So, key takeaways. So digital transformation is an imperative. It's happening, whether you recognize this or not. If you think back to, there are certain inflection points in history and business history where things have changed and people have recognized that they're changing, and they're still in existence today. Anybody remember Blockbuster Video? I'm sure they were sitting around there going, this mail order Netflix stuff is never going to take off. We'll be around forever. Nobody's going to want to do that. The internet there's not enough bandwidth. Today, ubiquitous bandwidth, no Blockbuster, Netflix is everywhere, especially now. So digital transformation is an imperative. It's happening. You need to think about what your role is in that for your businesses. The cloud and mobility are disruptors, but they're also accelerators of digital transformation. You need to think about what your role is in this transformation and being able to position yourselves within your businesses to be able to assist them in that transformation journey. We have to think about, since they're doing that, is a new approach to security. Extending your traditional legacy security architecture to try and encompass the internet is not going to work. The ability, scaling your VPN concentrators or your traditional access methodology to be able to support 100% remote workforce or some portion of that is cost prohibitive. It creates a bad user experience, especially since you're dragging them in to your network to basically you turn them to send them right back out to the internet. Direct access, you'll see Microsoft and ServiceNow and all these other SaaS vendors all recommend direct access. And you have to think about security in a different way to be able to secure that access, to make sure your users are secure no matter where they are, and have ubiquitous policy application for them no matter where they go. Then IT and security become a business enabler. That is so critical for your future and for the future of your company that I can't stress this enough. Your roles have changed. Your job is no longer a technology job. Your job is a business job. IT and security are not technology problems anymore. They are business problems, and you need to approach it that way. Transformation is a top-down initiative. This is, as leaders in your organization, your job is to think about not necessarily what's going on now, but what's going to be coming next, and how you position your organizations to be able to take advantage of the tools and technologies that are going to be coming. We're going to see more change in the next year than we've seen in the last 10 combined. I guarantee things from access methodologies. 5G is going to enable a lot of this. You're going to see virtual collaboration environments, all kinds of really cool stuff coming down. So one of the things that is secure cloud transformation drives business value. You become business value. Not only you can go out and talk to your partners and your customers and talk to them about your transformation and how what you're doing is enabling them to be more effective and more proactive and more agile, and you get to talk to them about security, that you've done it securely. So that actually drives that confirmation and becomes, value for your business, not necessarily a cost center. So thanks for that. And what I'm gonna do is stop this presentation. We'll go back onto the video and I'll start answering some of the questions that have come in, and you get to look at my mug for a little while. So there we go. So one of the questions that came in was, let me get my glasses because the print is very small. It says, how can C-suite people help and provide support to technical branches of a company to maintain agility with this ever-evolving nature of security and technology? So what we just mentioned was that this transformation is a top-down. This is going to require a little bit of education for some of those folks, especially in some of the C-suite who aren't in technology-focused companies, like manufacturing or healthcare, which healthcare is a little bit, I shouldn't say that because I worked in healthcare. There are a lot of technology-focused and advanced organizations, and a lot of CEOs, a lot of CFOs, a lot of chief legal officers, a lot of those folks got their jobs because they were good at what they did. They were technically competent. They became CEOs, they became CFOs, not because they were technically accurate. They had technical acumen in technology. They had technical acumen in their business areas. So they may not be aware of the things that they need to start thinking about or what's available out there. So it's incumbent upon you to help educate them. And again, sending them the webinars or sending them to, readings and stuff like that is always helpful, but the person that they trust is you. So what you have to do is take it upon yourself to say, hey, listen, Mr. CEO, Mr. CFO, Mr. Chief Marketing Officer, Mr. CIO, this is where I think we need to be able to support our business's growth. And using these tools and technologies is something that we need to start evaluating. The other part of that is go out and talk to your business leaders. Don't sit in your desk and say, hey, listen, what do we see? We're gonna do this stuff to you, not with you. You have to become a business partner, and that means getting out of your office and going and talking to your businesses and saying, hey, listen, what are you doing? And then figure out what you can do to aid in what they're doing. So next one is, it says, can an owner of a SME successfully make his office environment agile in terms of securing the utility of cloud services? Any tips? So small mid-cap businesses, absolutely. The thing that, you are a little bit more agile than everybody else. This doesn't have to cost a fortune, and we're not by any stretch of the imagination recommending rip and replace for anybody. Pick some use cases that work for you. If you have an Office 365 deployment, or if you have a Workday deployment, use a couple of use cases to be able to find out if this is something that works for you. Chances are it probably is. But pick small use cases, pick small little low-hanging fruit that you can use to take this out for a test drive. Just because you're a medium organization or you're a small medium enterprise doesn't mean you can't utilize the promise of the cloud to be more agile, and you don't have to spend yourself into the ground to do it. So being able to pivot. So pick a couple of use cases, make your life a lot easier, because most of our organizations that are in that position are cash strapped anyway. So the idea is fully utilize the investments that you have. I mean, if you're an Office 365 or if you're a Microsoft shop and you own E3, own E3. Use all the tools and technologies that are provided to you. I myself, when I was at a previous organization, I looked around. We were getting a cost squeeze, and especially now more than ever, we're experiencing a lot of organizations that are looking for us to drive efficiencies into our organization, which means fully utilizing the investments that you've made. I had a stack of legacy security equipment that was not sized for the environment that we were in. So I had to start looking around and saying, okay, I'm an E3 shop. Do I actually need antivirus? Nope, I've got antivirus through the E3, through Windows Defender. Do I need a separate desktop encryption tool? I've got one that comes with E3. Start thinking about utilizing that, and that will free up some dollars for you to be able to go do some experimentation along the lines of moving to a SASE environment, stuff like that. The other part of that is being able to reduce your outbound security costs and be able to use further utilize the existing infrastructure that you've got a lot longer, because you're now offloading that enterprise cost. So the next one, with social engineering being the reason of more than 90% of breaches, how can one ensure that employees working remotely do not become a victim of it? Okay, so this is one of the more interesting things that we've been seeing. So our employees are our most valuable asset when it comes to security, but they're also our biggest risk when it comes to security. There was a study that was done by a few years ago. It's actually been longer than that, a while ago, that was done by, it was either MIT or Stanford. Anyway, it was about risk compensation. And it's sort of along the lines, I don't know how most of you are probably not as old as I am, but it used to be cars didn't have airbags and shoulder belts. We had a lap belt. Nobody cared if you were seatbelt. But again, people didn't drive 100 miles an hour down the road. There was a normal sedate 55 or 60, because when you crashed, chances are you were going to get hurt pretty badly, because there were no protection mechanisms in the car to be able to save you from yourself. So nowadays we see people just boogieing down the highway just as fast as they can go, because the protections inside the cars have advanced to such a state that the chances are they're going to walk away from whatever happens to them. So they act in a more risky manner. So the concept of that is that our employees, when they come to the office, act in a manner that is more promiscuous than they otherwise would, because they believe folks like us have implemented technologies to protect them from themselves. The other interesting part of that is typically we in the office, we take advantage of and I'm going to borrow a phrase from our immunologist, which is herd immunity. They don't have the ability to pop up over the cube and look over and ask their buddy Kevin if this is a good link to click on or not. So what you have to do is communication has become more important for them than ever before. If you're not communicating to them at least once a week, you need to start. The other part of that is being able to provide protections for them in the event that they do click on a link. So using things like Zscaler, if they click on the link, we block the access both inbound and outbound if it's a bad file, using DLP and sandboxing and firewall rules, a full security stack. You can do that. But the cool thing is in the event that they do click it, you'll have some type of protection to be able to prevent them from doing that. So last question is do you see technology risk being driven from in the future? I see technology risk from a risk perspective is our businesses adopting technologies that we aren't completely familiar with, driving risks in our environment. And we need to be able to put in place an architecture to be able to mitigate that as much as we possibly can. So I'm getting the 5-minute wave. We've got about 2 minutes left since I've been running my mouth so long. I appreciate everybody hopping on today and listening to me. Hopefully everybody is staying at home and they're safe and all their loved ones are safe. If you have any questions about Zero Trust Network Access, SASE, anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure my email's plastered all over the place. You can get me on LinkedIn. You can go to www.zscaler.com. You can talk to anybody and we'll get you some information, some help that you need. Like again, we're here to help you. One of the things that Zscaler is pretty proud of is our relentless focus on our customers and providing them the ability to help make that digital transformation to be able to support their businesses as seamless and as pain-free as possible. So having said that, everybody have a great rest of the day. Have an awesome weekend. And thank you for your time and attention today and listening to me. I appreciate it. Everybody have a great day.